Yes, dear.
Coming to bed, honey?
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 Yes, dear.
Hey, smile!
Testing. The Story of Sisyphus. It's a story of a man who, in his attempt to escape death twice, good for him, Hades cursed him. Not good for him. The curse Sisyphus was forced to endure was to push a boulder up a hill, a huge boulder, one which every time it would approach the top would always fall back down again to the bottom. For him to then chase after it and push it back up to the top again, and he would endure this task forever. And so, Sisyphus pushes the boulder almost to the top of the hill, and the boulder falls back down again to the bottom, repeating the process over and over again and again for the rest of eternity. Some might see the life Sisyphus has been cursed to live with and wonder, hey Sisyphus, why do you persist? Why do you continue to press against this boulder? Can't you see that it's always gonna fall back down again at the bottom? Can't you see you'll never reach the top? Sisyphus, why don't you just give up? End the foolishness and stop trying, Sisyphus. And some might think that the conclusions to these reasonings are the obvious choice. If Sisyphus is doomed to futility, then his every attempt is meaningless. Each time the boulder rolls down the hill, it is arbitrary. Existence for Sisyphus is no less absurd and futile as an enthusiastic hamster in a wheel who attempts to reach its destination, or a gluttonous pig who chases the carrot at the end of a stick tied to its head. Perhaps then the only correct response for Sisyphus is to listen to his critics who urge him to just end foolishness already. After all, Sisyphus surely looks no less foolish than the hamster or the pig. Consequently, our only reasonable proposition to Sisyphus, in order to bring an end to the absurdity of his arbitrary futility, is as follows. Kill yourself. Just kill yourself, Sisyphus. Go on, Sisyphus. You can do it. We believe in you. Just kill yourself. Do it already. After all, surely, this is the only reasonable, logical conclusion from which your very existence follows, Sisyphus. And yet, despite all of his opportunity after feeling the boulder slip from his grip time and again, he has not yet thought to himself, yes, now this is the time, this is the day I throw myself in front of the boulder just as it slips. This is the day I become free from its repetitions. Perhaps the reason Sisyphus hasn't considered this inviting temptation is because he's so absent-minded that the hell of the boulder leaves him too distracted to consider the crushing embrace of a multi-ton rock as an option. However, this is unlikely, as who knows Sisyphus' repetitively futile reality more intimately than Sisyphus himself. What then can we attribute to be the explanation of Sisyphus' persistence? Yeah, existence is absurd, but I have no other life. I am not someone else, and I will never have another life after this one to look on towards as my second chance. There is no way out. There is no better alternative. For as long as I exist, I will press against this boulder. And for as long as I press against it, I will fall back down again. My existence does not get better than this. But I have also not deceived myself into thinking otherwise. I understand my existence with clarity, and from here I can decide the trajectory of my own meaning-making. I, Sisyphus, am happy, simply because I understand my existence with clarity, and I've embraced it. Well, that's Sisyphus' decision. Who's to argue with him? He and his critics both have something in common, however. They are both expressing their own nihilistic tendencies. The critics are so overwhelmed by the futility and absurdity of existence that they conclude, yes, suicide, how inviting. Whereas Sisyphus he's seen the absurdity and concluded, it's what it is, might as well enjoy it. The story of Jesus of Nazareth. It's a story of a God who, out of love for his creation, is passionately emboldened by their absurd, self-imposed trajectory, and in the move towards conquering the curse of humanity, he finds himself being murdered by his own creation. However, unlike Sisyphus' incapability of overcoming this curse, always attempting to reach the top of the hill, always failing, and then concluding that in order to be happy, he must come to terms with his existence, a posture which Sisyphus overcomes the nihilism of his futility. Christ, while being murdered by his own creation, a great display of the absurd nihilistic trajectory of the creation itself, overcomes the nihilism through carrying the burden to the top of the hill, dying there, and then resurrecting 3 days later. Unlike Sisyphus, who has been pushing the boulder up the hill for millennia, starting over and over, Christ manages to push the boulder to the top in his lifetime, not overcoming the curse through self-actualization, but rather overcoming it actually. The boulder which Christ carries to the top of the hill is called a crucifix. It is the same burden which he carries to the top which leads to his same death. Like Sisyphus, some might heckle and taunt Christ about the choice he is making. That, if you're really the Son of God, if you truly are as great and powerful as your claims seem to suggest, then why don't you take yourself down from this crucifix? You're embarrassing yourself, Son of God, Son of Man, supposed King of the Jews. Stop bleeding and dying like a criminal and come down from your cross. Punish us like the criminals we logically are, if you are so great and innocent. Yet, Christ remains on the cross. Either Christ has chosen to stay on this cross because he's not as great as his claims suggest, meaning that he could not summon the armies of heaven to save him if he chose, or the cross is a burden that, like Sisyphus, he must carry until the curse is complete. Christ is indeed king, and the crucifixion is inaugural. He is indeed on his throne reigning, and the gateway through to the kingdom is great burden, not carried on your own terms but on Christ's. Sisyphus carries the great burden of existence. Christ carries the great burden of existence. Sisyphus chases after the burden every time it falls to the bottom again, and will do so for eternity. Christ carries it to the very top of the hill, and, through an inauguration, conquers the burden. The burden has officially been conquered by one man in the lifetime of 33 years, a task Sisyphus couldn't accomplish in millennia. As the newly inaugurated king over all creation, as the new king of the hill, Christ offers to Sisyphus a proposal. I suggest that Christ offers one of two possibilities. Posit A. Christ takes on the curse of man, carrying the burdens of old creation to the top of the hill, overcoming the curse. Christ offers to Sisyphus that he can have his burden of pushing the boulder taken away, freeing Sisyphus from the burden of carrying his boulder, as Christ has done this for him. This posit suggests that Christ will not just help Sisyphus reach the top of the hill ultimately, but that he will make his means of doing so much easier. That his existence here and now will be less burdensome. As Sisyphus no longer has to push the boulder, he just has to make it to the top of the hill as Christ pushed the boulder on his behalf. Posit B. Christ takes on the curse of man, carrying the burdens of old creation to the top of the hill, overcoming the curse. Christ offers to Sisyphus the strength and freedom to overcome the curse also, as Christ has already done. This posit suggests that Christ does not take away the burden of this life here and now, at least not as Posit A suggests. Christ takes away the burden of the consequences of the curse, but we still must go through the burden of old creation. However, as Christ pushes the boulder to the top of the hill, he invites us to follow in his footsteps, as we, like him, push the boulder to the top by his strength. Proponents of Posit A might suggest that Posit B turns Sisyphus into the hero of the story, as he just finally made it to the top of the hill and overcomes the burden. Good for him. However, this cannot be the case, as prior to the work of Christ, Sisyphus has been attempting to reach the top of the hill for millennia. It is only after he accepts help from Christ that he makes it to the top. Posit A and B both suggest the same outcome. Sisyphus, by the work and power of Christ, finally made it to the top of the hill. Distinctions between A and B. What A and B disagree on is the way by which Christ's actions impact Sisyphus during his time climbing to the top of the hill. Is Sisyphus free from the burden of old creation, carried straight to the top? Is existence here and now more of a hike rather than an arduous struggle, where Sisyphus' existence is defined primarily by its end goal, that his here and now are no longer defined by suffering? Posit A may suggest this. Posit B suggests that while Sisyphus is free from the futility of existence, that he no longer lives an absurd life, but rather lives one which has an end goal in sight. His existence is still defined as one of suffering. However, rather than viewing his suffering as a total negative, Sisyphus is invited to view it as opportunity to suffer as his Lord has suffered. Rather than his existence being defined by the absurdity of futility, his existence is defined by doing as God does, living as God lives, that of suffering and going through the hell of existence so that one can come out of it through to the other side. This is what Christ does. Christ goes through the hell of human existence, and Christ overcomes it. He invites Sisyphus to do the same. The incompatibility of A and B. These two posits say different things about the nature of existing in the
now and the not yet.
They may not be compatible. If A suggests that Christ takes away the boulder from Sisyphus, yet Sisyphus continues to experience the unforgiving resistance of old creation, not dissimilar to his experience where he relied on his own strength, then this could cause Sisyphus to think twice about whether or not Sisyphus is truly finding himself saved by Christ, or if he is simply being convinced by a false narrative which makes his futile existence just a little more palatable. In this dilemma, Sisyphus reflects on his experience after being told that the boulder was taken away from him. Yet, he may find himself still pushing the boulder. Either he must conclude that he is not yet fully believed that Christ took the boulder, ironically a potentially never-ending dilemma which then turns Sisyphus' faith into a new boulder, or he must conclude that he was fooled into believing a false view of reality. This dilemma places the critique of the absurdist into reasonable view, as if Sisyphus convinces himself that the boulder was taken away when a true reflection of his existence would demonstrate the contrary, then he is doing himself a disservice by not coming to terms with the true nature of his existence. Sisyphus then isn't just a man who, has rightly placed his faith in Christ, but he is also a sad clown, joking with himself that he is not really pushing a boulder anymore, whilst sweating the paint off of his face, tripping over the long funny-coloured shoes that he himself has put on. But if Sisyphus looks like a sad clown, then that is only because a circus master gave him these clothes. Yet, unlike the absurdist who tells Sisyphus that a true becoming would lead to the realization that Christ does not offer anything other than a coping mechanism for his futility, Christ himself seems to disagree with this. Rather, according to Posit B, Christ offers to Sisyphus to truly come to terms with his own existence and, rather than persist in the perpetual futility of old creational absurdity, Christ offers to Sisyphus to, like Christ has already done, overcome the old existence. In this posit, there is no convincing Sisyphus that Christ will make his current way of things easy, thereby alienating him when he finds out that, actually that reality would be false. Rather, the true becoming is when Sisyphus, by the power of Christ, rejects his old way of existing in exchange for the new way of existence. Yet, either way, until Sisyphus reaches the top of the hill, he must carry a burden. Burdening for eternity. If Sisyphus must carry a burden regardless, then which burden will he choose to carry? Will he choose to either burden for Christ, like Christ, by Christ, or will he continue to burden as he has done for millennia? He can either choose to finally reach the top of the hill by following Christ on the way up, or he can choose to perpetuate the same existential hell that he is now creating for himself. Regardless of which posit is more plausible than the other, after Sisyphus chooses to reject the offer, he becomes the maker of his own hell. He and his decisions become the means by which he is freed from the futility of his current existence, where he, alongside his potential new king and the king's people, can endure together to the top of the hill. But if Sisyphus so chooses, he can remain comfortable with the weight of the boulder for the rest of his existence, and then, like the greatest victim of Stockholm Syndrome, can convince himself that actually this is the right choice. After all, I have found meaning in this boulder. I have created my own meaning in my meaningless existence. I have found the shine and glimmer of happiness amidst the absurdity of reality. Perhaps Sisyphus can become even comfortable in the hell he is banishing himself into. Perhaps a throw pillow here and there may make the flames more palatable. Perhaps a nice floor lamp can illuminate the darkness. Maybe he can decorate the boulder. A pale blue with some floral patterns might be nice. Maybe a rug at the base of the hill would be good, so that whenever he is forced by the boulder to go back down again, he can have something soft and comfortable to stand on. I suppose when he begins to experience loneliness, a pet could help. Either way, like how he is forced to push against the great burden, he is also forced to make a choice. I'm not going to doubt that for a second Sisyphus really could find his own meaning amidst the absurdity of his existence. That he really can learn to enjoy his life. That he really can be happy. I also believe that at the top of the hill is a kingdom that lasts forever, one of plenty and great joys, the true end goal that Sisyphus desires. However, what is getting between Sisyphus and the top of the hill is not a great boulder. It is Sisyphus himself. Sisyphus must make a choice. One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
The now and the not yet. And it's very important to get the balance between those two right. Some people want a bit too much now and forget that it's still a matter of labour and struggle and often anguish in prayer. Other people are so concerned about the continuing darkness of the present world that they imply that Jesus will only really be reigning when he comes again in glory.